let's say, the same age for these mice. And we were wondering, why is that? What could be the reason? So we conducted a meta-analysis of different papers, so of different studies, and just try to like find really the cause of this variation that we see. And what we found out is that it's mainly due to the fact that these different research groups, that use different methodological approaches to label and quantify these motor neurons in the mice. And there we saw that it's actually important that you select a specific part of the spinal cord when you want to investigate the motor neuron degeneration. Because this is also then what we show here, that for example in the lumbar spinal cord of these mice, within each spinal cord segment, there are a set amount of motor neurons. So they can vary, even though the segments are just like 1 or 2 millimeters away from each other. But for example, one segment has 300 motor neurons and the other has 700. So it's like really different. But if you then use a method that is not looking specifically, just like, I don't know, cutting through the whole lumbar spinal cord of these mice, then you do not find these changes. And since you know that SMA is like a really proximal to distal progression, this is also what we see in these mice, it's really important to be segment specific, because it could be that the more proximal parts are more affected than the distal parts, but they are really close to each other. So if you're not specific where you're looking, this could be problematic. And we also compared different markers to label motor neurons and found out that some of the markers that have been used are actually not that specific. You know, they label also other cells, but those cells are actually not motor neurons, which is also important because, you know, we don't know if these other cells are affected in SMA. So if you just use them to count your motor neurons, then you can, I don't know, miss maybe some degeneration in the motor neurons and underestimate the actual loss that we see. And
sorry, does anybody know what proximal versus distal means?
You know, or they don't know. I can also. You can always interrupt me and say I didn't get this, because I'm like super into the topic and it's just like, for me, sometimes hard to break it down. So what I mean with proximal versus distal is like close to the body would be proximal, and then distal would be, for example, I don't know, my toe. So really far away from the middle of my body. So proximal muscles are the ones that I need to use when I don't know, do this.
Oh, I know.
And the far away are like, you know, the finger movements. And this is not so affected in SMA, but like the really close to the body center, those are affected first. And the same is true actually for the motor neurons, because they innervate those muscles. So the motor neurons that innervate those really centered muscles, they are affected first, and then later on the distal ones are affected.
But that sort of goes against the fact that you start using the muscles in the legs and arms before you feel using muscles.
What do you mean with?
I mean, you use the muscles in the legs and the arms before you use muscles in the core.
I mean, usually there's like this, that these muscles are first affected, and then you still have, you know, the finger movements, but like the movement of like the really close centered muscles, they are affected first usually, and then the latest where it would be affected are like the finger or like really far away, basically from the center.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think this is basically the main message, that you have to like really be precise in the methods that you use, and that can be, you know, an explanation why we sometimes see these differences between studies, so that we should maybe keep this in mind when people are doing new studies, so that they maybe can, I don't know, come to a I don't know, an agreement. Hey, we are going to use this and this study, or this and this method in the future, so that we can all be, I don't know, comparable between each other. Yes. Yes.